Hi, Steve Gamache with a Chef Knives to Go quick look product video. This time we're looking at the Ikeda Damascus AS Gyuto 250mm knife. This knife, which is meant to be kind of a design or clone of a Matsumoto KS style knife, has a core steel of Aogami blue super carbon steel and a heat treat rating of about 62 Rockwell. The construction of this is a Damascus cladding, and you'll see this does have some bluing or patina all on the blade. I cut some steak with this, and so it's developed a patina. And as you can see, it's not a stainless cladding, so it is a carbon cladding. It is a reactive cladding. You've got a real nice chiseled kanji on this blade, and it's got a really subtle effect on the Damascus. So it's not a tactile type pattern. It's not super visible up at the top here, but when you hit the cladding edge area and it grinds down to the edge, you'll see that cladding very nicely. So it's a nice understated effect. Now this knife is a little different than some, but we'll talk about that. So the weight on this knife is 5.5 ounces. These will vary based on the handle of the knife. Mark puts a variety of handles on these, so a light blade considering the size. The length on this is right about 250, and the overall length is 15.4 inches, and that'll vary by handle again as well. The spine at the base is about 3.5, so it's fairly thick. Kick in, there you go. It's fairly thick right out of the tang, right out of the handle, but then thins down. And one of the characteristics that's really nice on this blade is look how thin that gets towards the edge. So it really does thin down in a nice continuous distal taper all the way to a very thin tip. And the blade height on this one is quite a bit shorter than some of the other ones, so that I think this is a bit of an anomaly. I'll talk about this one. It's a second that Mark sold me. So this one's 44.8, but I believe the other ones on the site are more like the 46 range, so maybe 47. So this is a little bit shorter maybe than some. I guess they'll vary a little bit. This particular knife, just to full disclosure, is a second that Mark sold me, and without a handle. It's got a bit of a defect in the Damascus cladding right here, and this particular one also wasn't relieved too nicely on the left side of the blade, so I had to do some work on that. And then this one actually came with a slightly bent tip that I ground on. I left a little bit of the tip there to see if it would work okay before grinding down too much of it, and I had to straighten the front part of the blade slightly. So this had a number of issues, but hey, it's a second. So an A1 version blade that's not a second will have none of those issues, so this one was something I could play with a little bit. In terms of performance, it's a really nice performing blade. It's got a very flat overall profile, as you can see, with a long flat spot on it and not much belly. And it's a very thin blade at the edge. This thing does go through ingredients very, very nicely. That tip is super thin. It's actually fairly flexible at the tip, because it is a pretty thin blade, but it's stiff enough to go through things. I wouldn't put anything real heavy on this or through it with this blade, but it's a real nice performing blade. So it's got some interesting characteristics, and it's really a nice looking blade. The out-of-the-box edge, I'm not even going to comment on this because it was a second, so I put my own edge on it, and it got very, very sharp very quickly. So it's a nice sharpening steel, and it's just a very interesting blade. He's putting a variety of handles on these as well. So don't pay too much attention if you've seen that tang. This is my first full handle install, and I made the opening a little bit bigger, and I sealed it up with some epoxy. So it's not quite as clean as a full-on handle that somebody knows what they're doing as far as the install goes. But there you have a very interesting blade. These are really nice blades, actually. Mark really likes them over the actual Matsumoto KS for a number of reasons, including Aogami Super Steel, really nice grinds, and it's a nice thin blade, especially at the tip. So there you have the Ikeda Damascus AS Gyuto 250mm.